I'll be honest, I'm skeptical not only of the existence of alien technology, I'm fairly suspicious of the existence of alien life, which is a prerequisite for alien intelligence and technology, right? So, and I've made arguments for that when I was on Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman, but I'm not the final word either, so caveat emptor.
Why don't you believe that there is alien life or any, you have said before that you don't believe that there is alien life or intelligent alien life because
I'm careful about it. I don't say I don't believe. Like I say, I don't believe in gravity either.
Evidence. There's no evidence.
That's right. Right.
But people like Jack Sarfati would say that there is evidence and they've seen it, and it's not something you can measure and test in a laboratory with beakers. It's something that you have to see. It's intelligence, it's police, it's investigative work, it's police work. Like it's something that scientists aren't going to have access to and they won't be able to measure and detect, but it's something that exists because they've seen it and they know that, if you have a security clearance or whatever it might be, it's verifiable. Okay. and it's there.
So I ask you, are you Christian?
I'm not really like religious.
You don't believe in God or
Christ? I believe in God. I haven't really explored it too much. I believe in something.
Yeah.
I don't follow a strict faith.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. You're not a practice. I don't practice.
Right.
Fine. But people that believe the existence of Jesus Christ, not only based on the testimonies of the New Testament, but also because they've had personal revelation or they've been saved, salvation by works of Jesus that they ascribe to Jesus, right? Would you attribute those scientifically in any way? Would you say that their personal revelation of Christ, in their deepest, darkest moments, they're at the bottom of a bottle or they're at the top of the world when they have a baby or whatever, is that a scientific claim or is that a faith claim?
It's not scientific.
Right. So in that sense, that's okay because faith is one thing and science is another thing. These things that they're talking about that they've seen with their eyes or they've experienced and there's some, cover, those are also, now they're not only faith, but they're also saying they're scientific. If you're making a claim that there's objects and those objects have traveled across interstellar distances or as Tom DeLonge told me on my podcast a long time ago, that those things have come from forwards in time or backward. I don't fully understand.
Right.
And he can't prove it, and he has no chain of evidence that traces the alien spacecraft that he claims he has evidence of. He's lost the kind of provenance, as they would call it in antiquing. So at what level do you say, well, okay, now you're just talking about faith, which is fine. You could talk about faith all you want, but faith is almost like taste. Like, I hate fish. There's no much, you could take me to the seafood restaurant down the street and tell me how great this thing tastes, and I'm going to say, I don't give a crap. I'm not going to eat that damn thing. And you could say, even as people do, it doesn't taste like fish. I'll say, you know what else doesn't taste like fish? A freaking hamburger doesn't taste like fish. So I'll just skip the middleman and I'll have my own hamburger, right? So there's no amount of that will convince a person to believe based on your faith in something else, which may be very visceral to you. It may have saved your life, or it may have, made you a better man. But that doesn't have any effect on other people. And science is about the determination of rules and patterns throughout the universe that hold throughout the universe. The Copernican principle states the universe doesn't care who you are, where you are, what you're made of, what day it is. If I drop your gift, I'm going to wish you a happy Hanukkah. So I brought you a gift.
Thank you.
So I got you two gifts. Well, 3 gifts. So this is your gift for early Christmas present, because I want you to keep your anus clean.
Your anus. So
I got you.
Wow, this is amazing.
You got to share with Steve.
Steve, we can we can bleach our butthole.
Your ani. You know that NASA's considering changing the name because it's so embarrassing to say Uranus, right? They've commissioned a panel.
That's beautiful.
They've come up with the following term: Urectum. So, and I'll tell you what this is later on. But if you look at something that is portending, sort of masquerading as something that could be scientific, forces, fields, life in the universe, all these things are contingent upon the existence of life, which is a physics question, a biology question, evolution question. And so they're saying, here's this thing that interacts with some people but not others. Well, that violates the Copernican principle. Sorry, I'm going to have a big problem with you if you say that, like, there are only certain people that could experience it. So what good is it? So in other words, only the people that want to believe it will see it. and only the people that already do believe it will experience it. That's not science. It may be some cult or some new thing. And you see a lot of the same types of behavior. The people get very obsessed, almost cult-like, in their fervor for this. Jack is screaming out why won't you listen to me? Why won't you? And I think he's suffering a crisis of meaning, and that, he wants to be accepted by as many people as possible. Well, how's that going to happen if you keep, solipsistically referring back to yourself that you can only be the one that could be trusted with this information, and you're the only one that could see it, and nobody, no matter how much, will ever get to experience your perception, your taste, your experience. So I feel like it's at the highest level, it becomes pointless almost to debate these people.
So what, in your view, what do you think explains all these things like Roswell and these things that these pilots are seeing on their radars and the sightings above these nuclear bases and all this stuff? Like what do you deduce from that?
I don't want to avoid the question, but I'd say, like, why don't you believe in Muhammad? Like, why aren't you a practicing Muslim, Danny? It's not fair, right? I mean, like, maybe you haven't seen evidence to believe. Like, it's not up to you to explain why you're not a practicing Muslim, right? It's up to me, if I was proselytizing as a Muslim, to try to convince you that actually Muhammad, the prophet, was this and that, and you should accept him, or Jesus, or whatever, right? In other words, my lack of believing it is not a statement about me, unless you say, like, well, what? In other words, how can I explain a billion Muslims worshiping Muhammad, Allah, and being like, okay, this is something that has convinced them. So now you're asking me an analogous thing, like, what explains all these things? Well, I don't believe that they're representative of a reproducible scientific chain of events that can be tested using the scientific method. If in fact it's true, which I don't know, but if it's true that they only reveal themselves to certain people in certain places around nuclear plants, then I have to be very suspicious as a scientist, right? I mean, I'm a father, so I have kids, and I look at the kids, and if they say, like, well, I have an imaginary friend. Oh, what's his name? Well, you can't know, you can't experience him. So, but he's telling me to, like, steal money from your wallet, like, okay, well, I would like to know more about that, because you're telling me that something is happening with something that I cannot have access to, because either I don't have clearance or the government's conspiring to keep me from knowing that information, et cetera, et cetera. So what is the information that's out there? It's too hard for me to kind of assess the credibility of what's been claimed by various people. As I said, they're much more courageous. They're much braver, bigger balls than I'll ever have, right? That's Grush, whoever, Fravor. But that doesn't give them any extra ability to practice the scientific method than I have. And when I don't know, I mean, it would almost be better for me, because you've investigated these more. I'll say why I think it's unlikely. I'll never say that they don't exist. I won't even say that what they're claiming isn't correct. I'll just say you have to ascribe a probability. And to me, the probability is very low. I can't say it's zero.
That they ever saw this stuff ever happened? That
there are actually, I don't want to say that they saw it, or that there are alien spacecraft from another solar system somewhere else in either our galaxy or another galaxy that has been collected by human beings on Earth.
Right. I'm not saying that that's what it is. I'm saying, like, Ryan, or the people that Ryan knows, or Fravor, the things that they saw. What would you imagine them being based on your scientific perspective and your back? Like, you don't think that they're aliens from another galaxy. I don't think they are either.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think? What do you think the explanation for them is?
Well,
do you think that it's just a construct?
Well, so the name of my podcast is called Into the Impossible, and oftentimes people think it comes from the Sherlock Holmes quote, which is that once you've excluded anything, no matter how crazy the facts that remain, no matter how impossible they are, that is the actual truth. And for me, the Into the Impossible comes from a different quote from Arthur C. Clarke, that the only way to determine the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. Right. I have to ask, what types of phenomena are possible within the laws of physics that I am very, very conversant with, and what things would go, so to speak, outside the laws of physics? You'd have to ascribe things to that. So in other words, how many improbable things does one have to believe to actually accept that these things are from another galaxy? That's a separate question, right?
Yes.
So what are they seeing? So I will ask a different question. I'll say, what are plausible other explanations for what they've seen? So here's a statistic. When the planet Venus is visible on Earth about 9 months out of the year. 3 months out of the year, it's behind the sun. It's too close to the sun. It's emerging from behind the sun. You can't see it. But 9 months out of the year. Not only in America, but throughout the world, the number of UFO sightings is statistically an incredibly amount more meaningful to be detected are to be claimed during the 9 months of the year when Venus is visible. It's extremely bright. If you've ever seen it, it doesn't seem to move. It seems to hover, like the way the moon doesn't move when you're driving, the giant parallax of it. The same thing happens with Venus. It does change a little bit. It doesn't twinkle. It doesn't flash. And so millions of people, literally millions of people, report it when Venus is out. The number of UFO reports goes up dramatically in a statistically significant manner. Conversely, when it's not up, they go down, okay? So that's an explanation for some things that people are seeing, right? So if you said every single one of those people, unless they're all right, then we can't believe in that being a UFO. Okay, so you'd be right. That's Venus, so it's not a UFO. We have very good identification, and it's not even flying. It's orbiting. So other things that make me suspicious about these claims. A lot of them are by military pilots. So what do militaries do? Do they only have the best interest of their people at heart? Do the military ever use their own, and tragically and horribly use their own conscripts or volunteers? Do they only use them for beneficial purposes or for the actual missions that they signed up to do? Do they ever do psyops on them? Of course they do. Right? Do they ever abuse the power? The government ever abuse the power and abuse the people that are very bravest among us? Of course they do, right? Do they ever subject them to things they would never subject ordinary citizens to under the Constitution? Yes, they're exempt from certain things. They force them to get vaccines. They do all sorts of things, right? And so could it be that they are maybe testing these pilots?
Absolutely.
Right? Furthermore, what are some other types of technology? Do you think all technology that the U.S. inventory has or adversary governments have right now is known and is published in popular science?
Hell no.
Of course not, right? So therefore, there could be advanced technology that could have been basically kept completely clandestine until it was interacted with by someone who thought they were a whistleblower, right? So, and then is it possible to maintain the conspiracy? It would have to be, David and others are alleging there's a conspiracy to cover up these things. And, can the conspiracy be maintained over 8 decades, not only between the thousands of individuals? You have to imagine, let's say Roswell. Even though I know it's not that. So don't flame me on the channel comments below when you like, subscribe, and comment. I'll drop that for you.
Thank you.
And don't flame me. I don't believe this, but let's just say basically something like Roswell happened, where there was a crashed spacecraft in 1947, which, by the way, occurred very close to the Trinity site, very close to military secret compounds, and as are many of these things cited. Very few of them are cited over Manhattan, in the middle of the Thanksgiving Day parade, right? Many of them occur in warning areas, which are military traffic areas that even I, as a small pilot, am allowed to go into. So where the Tic Tac was seen was an area that's not restricted or prevented from access to. It's something I go into at my risk. I can get shot down. They actually use my plane as target practice. They don't actually shoot. Thank God I won't be here. But there's a little Cessna, and they'll practice locking on. Thank God they do. I want them to train. I want them to be the best freaking fighting force in the world. I love this country. I want them to be, and I want them to be protected. I want them to be safe. I don't want them to be experimented on. I don't have control over that. Right. So there are all sorts of things that they could do, especially during military. Military are the least reliable in a certain sense because they're probably the ones that are most confronted with both the adversary's highest technology and their own friendly militaries, psyops and experiments on them, and loyalty tests and all sorts of false flag events or colored wars, all sorts of things that they can do to sort of spoof and to train and to test the fighting force's readiness and their loyalty. And that's just a fact of life. So, and you have to. Is that more plausible, Danny? And I'm not saying I'm right. And again, I'm never saying this that I have a final word either. Do your own due diligence. This is not investment advice. But if you look at the data, then you compare it to the alternative hypothesis. It's called the likelihood ratio test. This is what scientists do. You say, how likely is it that this vaccine is going to improve your life and prevent some disease versus it's going to kill you? And for most vaccines, it's very important to know that likelihood ratio. But you're always comparing the null hypothesis. Okay, the null hypothesis is this is not going to do any harm or any benefit, or in this case, there are no aliens. Is my null hypothesis. Okay. Then take this ratio, and we could do a mathematical function that will predict what are the different levels. In other words, should it be 99% confident? Should it be 50% confident, which is almost useless? Or should it be 99.99% confidence in hypothesis? It's called hypothesis testing. And then you have to question, what if there are aliens and you assume that they're not, so you get a false negative? Okay, so if Brian Keating is right, then I'm responsible for a huge false negative. Or if you say there's a false positive, you are claiming they're aliens when there aren't aliens. Those are both errors, right? In both cases, you're wrong. You'd like it to be there are aliens. If there are aliens, you detect that there are aliens. Or if there are no aliens, you rule out the existence of aliens. Those are the kind of correct answers. And then there's two different ways you can be wrong: false positive, false negative.
Right.
Which is worse? Like, you go to the doctor. The doctor says to you, Danny, you got cancer. Which would you rather have there be? He's false positive or false negative?
Right.
Right. Positive. So it's right. Yeah. But normally what happens is you might get a false negative, right? I mean, that's much more common because it's hard to see small amounts of cancer, for example.
Right.
It's also hard to see small amounts of UFOs, right? And these things have been able to travel across interstellar distances, right? And the old joke Elon Musk keeps making, like, why is the photo quality so bad? Why is the video, why is it so crappy? The cell phones have gotten so much better. I think I have some explanations for that, by the way. Or here's my other favorite one. And again, I'm steel manning my opponents, not my enemies,
right.
Just my intellectual opponents. I don't not want to believe it. By the way, let me put a pin in the explanation for why these things keep happening where they do. But and good physicists like Eric and others, even people that aren't physicists that are skeptical. Avi Loeb is a good example. He's a skeptic. He doesn't believe, and he's got vested interest in millions and perhaps billions of dollars in the Galileo project and all the other things he's doing. He'd be great for you to talk to.
I talked to him. He's on here.
Okay, great. So my question is, who would be more overjoyed at the existence of if again, assume they're aliens for the time being, have they led to the Independence Day like destruction of the Earth? No, right? We're still here.
Yes.
Maybe they're planning something, but like so far they've been benevolent or benign.
Right.
They haven't bothered us, right? Who would be more overjoyed with a race, a species, a civilization of technologically advanced aliens? Who would be more thrilled than physicists? We would be, you see how we get with like ChatGPT, which is like nothing compared to the kind of intelligence it would take to make an alien spacecraft that can traverse the galaxy and bend space and time, right? In other words, physicists have a vested interest in aliens existing. In other words, I will say, I want there to be aliens to tell us about the physics of the 29th century. I don't want to wait that long. I want to know, I'm going to live for another 50 years maybe. I want to learn as much as possible while I'm still alive. Aliens can help be the ultimate cliff notes to help me understand it. And so I have a vested interest in there being aliens, okay? But I as I say, I'm skeptical about it, okay? Now I mentioned there's this kind of joke, again, in Elonism, gotta love Elon, but he's like, oh, these aliens are so advanced. They navigated from the closest star system, Proxima Centauri B, at traveling at quarter the speed of light, would take 25 years and do untold damage, to whatever biologics are in there, and it would require, basically the warping of space-time to accelerate to these speeds, anything macroscopic like the size of a spacecraft, like a Tic Tac, almost an infinite supply of energy, propulsion, Sephardi warp drives, whatever you want. Okay.
Yeah. But
they crash in the island of Catalina off the coast of Los Angeles. They like crash somewhere in Roswell. In other words, they're so skilled that they traverse the entire galaxy, but they can't. They're not real because they crash all the time.
I don't think that's what a lot of people believe. A lot of people believe that they're from here, that they're living under the oceans and they're coming from here. They're coming out of the oceans and they're. That's what Sarfati believes. That's what a lot of people I talk to on here believe. They're not coming from other galaxies. They're actually here.
So like Atlantis?
Maybe Atlantis. I don't know. But they think that these things are coming from the oceans, and these things maybe live under the oceans, or they're walking among us, or maybe there are people that are out there like me and you, or Elon Musk, more likely, that are genetically also like this alien race, right? They look and talk like me and you, but they aren't. They don't look like the aliens we see in the movies, but they're technically aliens. Okay. And or this technology that's coming around, that's flying around that they're seeing is not necessarily. It's not coming from another star system. It's coming from here somewhere, and it's remaining hidden.
So I'm talking more about the types of alien, like Roswell. Roswell, to my knowledge, was not from the ocean. It was from another star, Reticulum, whatever, Omega. So. But I just want to make a statement about that. If you do hear that, again, I'm supporting the fact pattern that should be amenable to many members of your audience, and not to ingratiate myself, but because it's a legitimate. As a scientist, you should actually specify all the ways you could be wrong.
Right.
I'm telling you all the ways Brian Keating could be wrong. So in this case, though, those that say that it's impossible to believe that these advanced civilizations crashed, after navigating their whole way across the entire galaxy, right? No, actually, it's a very common effect. Something like 6 times. So I don't want to say this, jinx myself. I'm getting on a plane in an hour or so, an hour and a half. So something like 6 times, you're 6 times more likely to be involved in a plane that crashes upon landing than you are at any other phase in flight.
Right.
Even though the fraction of that plane being in landing is only a few minutes or a few seconds.
Landing and takeoff, right? Both.
Yeah, takeoff is also dangerous, but landing in particular seems, and it's the whole landing process, not just like touching down the runway.
Right.
And these aren't fatal crashes. I mean, 90% of crashes people walk away from. Most commercial airlines, and please God, it should hold true at least through tonight when I get home. A lot of these things are, I think, basically pandering to like, oh, well, they're not there. You can just dismiss it because the video quality is crappy. They wouldn't crash land if they're such expert pilots, and they wouldn't allow themselves to be seen. Those are completely illegitimate arguments against it. Supporting a position I believe in, which or faith in, or have evidence for, which is that they don't exist. So I think it's important as a scientist to do that, and I think the more you talk to experimentalists, the better. People are actually building stuff, grappling with law. If you brought Edward Witten in here, I don't know if he could, turn on the Wi-Fi and get the Wi-Fi up to boot again. The theoretical physicists are very different than experimental physicists. They have a different skill set. It's much more like a mathematician. I don't think anyone would say, let's get the mathematicians in here. Although, people like Stephen Wolfram have done things with like deciphering alien language in the movie Arrival. He was a consultant on that. So, and Kip Thorne actually did a lot of work in the movie Interstellar. So, yeah, these are things that are of interest, but I almost am betting against my own self-interest.